Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to hear is not the kind of news anyone in Blue Jays Nation wanted waking up this morning. This is the story of a team that cannot seem to catch a break, a front office that just made a move that raised every eyebrow in the building, and a fan base that is running dangerously low on patience. It is April 24, 2026. The Rogers Center is getting ready to open its doors for the Cleveland Guardians. And behind the scenes? Pure, unfiltered tension. Buckle up because this one is going to hurt a little. Let's go back to the moment everything changed. Not the trade. Not the standings. The moment. The singular, gut-wrenching, season-altering moment that every Blue Jays fan who was watching on Tuesday night felt deep in their chest before the broadcast even confirmed what they feared. Nathan Lux is sprinting toward first base. Everything looks normal. And then, something goes wrong. He grabs his leg. He pulls up. And in that fraction of a second, you could feel the collective heartbeat of an entire fanbase skip. Because Blue Jays fans have seen this before. They know what that grab means. They know what that limp means. They have lived through enough of these moments to recognize the script before anyone reads it out loud. The diagnosis came back as a left hamstring strain. And look, on paper, hamstring strain sounds manageable. It sounds like the kind of thing you slap some ice on, do some light stretching, and shake off in a week. But anyone who has followed baseball long enough knows that hamstrings are the most deceptive injuries in the sport. They heal when they want to heal. They flare back up without warning. They turn a 2-week timeline into a 6-week nightmare faster than you can say disabled list. And for Nathan Lux, who was not just another bench piece but was actively carrying the weight of the Blue Jays' outfield depth on his back, the timing could not have been more catastrophic. Think about what Nathan Lux represented to this team coming into this season. This was the guy who showed up to spring training with something to prove. He was not handed anything. He earned his spot through sheer, stubborn determination, through at-bats that showed real offensive promise, through a presence in the clubhouse that gave this roster a certain kind of energy. He was the insurance policy, the guy you point to when someone asks what happens if George Springer needs a rest day. What happens if Kiermaier's body starts talking back to him? The answer was always supposed to be, we have Nathan Lux. And now? Now that answer does not exist anymore, at least not in the short term. And the silence where that answer used to be is absolutely deafening. John Schneider went in front of the cameras and said there is no panic. He used his best comm manager voice. He chose his words carefully. He nodded with the kind of practiced composure that managers develop after years of being asked questions they do not want to answer. But here is the thing about that composure. It does not match what is actually happening on the ground. Because the very next morning, less than 24 hours after Lux went down clutching his hamstring, the Blue Jays front office announced a move that tells a completely different story. And that story is not calm. That story is not composed. That story is written in bold, capital letters that spell out exactly 2 words. We're panicking. On Friday morning, the notification dropped. Toronto acquired catcher Willie Maciver from the Texas Rangers for cash considerations. To clear a roster spot, Tyler Fitzgerald was designated for assignment. Now, let's sit with that for a moment. Let's really sit with it. Because there is a lot happening in a transaction that looks simple on the surface but is actually screaming several things simultaneously if you know how to listen. The Blue Jays designated Tyler Fitzgerald, a player with a future, a player with legitimate upside, for assignment, in order to bring in a 29-year-old catcher carrying an 18.6% career batting average. Read that number back to yourself one more time. 18.6%. That is not a number that wins baseball games. That is a number that exists on the far, dark end of the spectrum where hope goes to get very quiet. Willie Maciver has bounced between Oakland and the Texas Rangers organization without ever truly staking his claim at the major league level. He is headed to AAA Buffalo for now, which at least signals the Blue Jays are not throwing him directly into the fire. But the message embedded in this transaction is unmistakable, and fans saw through it immediately. This is not a move made from a position of strength. This is not a move made from a place of organizational confidence. This is a front office looking at its catching situation with deep, unsettling uncertainty and trying to paper over the cracks before anyone notices the wall is starting to lean. Ross Atkins is trying to stop a wound from bleeding, and the tool he reached for was a bandage when the situation might already require something significantly more serious. And here is where the story gets darker. Because the Lux injury and the Mayseaver acquisition do not exist in a vacuum. They exist within the context of a Toronto Blue Jays team that is currently sitting with a 10-14 record. 4th place in the American League East. Not 3rd. Not hovering around .500 in a way that feels temporary. 4th place, with a losing record, in late April, facing a schedule that is about to get significantly less forgiving. And the Cleveland Guardians, the team that just walked through the Rockies, have been displaying for stretches of this season. If Toronto shows up tonight with the same flat, low-energy approach at the plate that has defined too many of their recent outings, this 3-game series against Cleveland has the very real potential to become something deeply ugly. It has the potential to become the kind of series that shifts a season's narrative permanently, the kind of stretch that you look back on in August and say, that is where things went truly sideways. The Blue Jays have played 24 games. 24 opportunities to establish an identity, to set a tone, to show the American League East that this is a team with real intentions and real capability. And the record after those 24 games is 10 wins and 14 losses. That is not a slow start in the romantic, early season sense where you tell yourself the numbers will correct. That is a pattern. And patterns in baseball, particularly early patterns built on poor offensive production and mounting injury issues, have a way of becoming very difficult to reverse once they take hold. The offense is where this conversation has to land eventually, and it is not a comfortable conversation to have. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is on this roster. Alejandro Kirk is on this roster. These are legitimate, proven major league contributors with track records that command respect across the entire sport. And right now, this lineup needs them to stop being good in bursts and start being dominant on a nightly basis. Not occasionally electric. Not 3-hit games followed by 4-game stretches of invisibility. Consistently, relentlessly, undeniably present. The Blue Jays do not have the roster depth right now to absorb quiet nights from their best players. Every single time Vladdy Jr. steps into that box, the margin for error in this lineup is thin enough that a passive at-bat does not just cost the team one opportunity, it shifts the entire emotional weight of the inning, and sometimes the game. The outfield situation, which was already a conversation before Lux went down, has now escalated into something that deserves to be called what it actually is, a crisis. Springer's availability has never been something you can count on completely across a full season, and Kiermaier's health history means every time he is out there, a quiet voice in the back of your head is asking how long this particular stretch of availability lasts. Lux was the answer to both of those questions. He was the guy who absorbed the risk and gave the organization flexibility. Without him, at least in the short term, the Blue Jays are one bad day away from running out a collection of outfielders that would make even the most optimistic fan in Section 113 shift uncomfortably in their seat. And here is the truly maddening part of this entire situation, the part that keeps Blue Jays fans up at night scrolling through transaction wires and injury reports at 2 in the morning. The talent is there. It is genuinely, undeniably there. This organization has real players. It has Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who in his best moments is one of the most frightening offensive forces in the American League. It has pitching depth that, on paper, should be competitive. It has a farm system that has been quietly producing interesting names. But there is this persistent, almost supernatural ability to have things go wrong at the exact worst moment, in the exact worst sequence, in a way that tests the structural integrity of every carefully laid plan. It is not just bad luck. It is bad luck with a flair for the dramatic. It is bad luck that shows up wearing a tuxedo and announces itself at the door. The Tyler Fitzgerald designation is a subplot in this story that deserves more attention than it is going to get, because in the rush to analyze the Mayseaver acquisition and process the Lux injury, Fitzgerald's situation is getting buried. This is a player with legitimate organizational value, a player who had upside worth developing, being moved out of the picture to make room for depth that is, by any fair measure, a downgrade in terms of long-term value. When you are designating players with futures to acquire players without them, you are making a trade of present uncertainty for future uncertainty, and the math does not work cleanly in either direction. Atkins is making moves that suggest the front office sees a problem significant enough to require immediate action, but the action itself does not inspire the kind of confidence that suggests the problem is actually being solved. Now let us zoom out for a moment and look at this entire situation from the 30,000-foot view, because the individual moves and the individual injuries only tell part of the story. The bigger story is about identity. The bigger story is about what kind of team the Blue Jays want to be and whether the current version of this roster is capable of embodying that identity under pressure. Good teams, championship-caliber teams, do not just perform when everything is going right. They perform when things are going wrong. They perform when the injury report is long and the lineup is patchworked and the opposing starter is sharp. They find a way to manufacture offense, to grind out wins, to make the other team feel like no lead is safe and no game is decided until the last out. That version of the Blue Jays has shown up occasionally this season. In flashes. In individual at-bats and individual innings where you see exactly what this roster could be if it all clicked at once. The problem is that those flashes have not turned into flames. They have not sustained. And the longer this team goes without finding a consistent identity, the harder it becomes to manufacture one once the calendar starts turning serious. Tonight's game against Cleveland is not just a game. It is a referendum. It is 3 hours of baseball that will either provide a reason for cautious optimism or add another chapter to a story that is becoming genuinely difficult to defend. The Guardians are not going to feel sorry for Toronto's injury situation. They are not going to go easy because the Blue Jays are short-handed and scrambling. They are going to attack every weakness, exploit every lineup gap, and dare the Blue Jays to prove that the men standing in that dugout are capable of competing at the level this franchise's payroll demands. Guerrero Jr. has to be the story tonight. Not in the way where he goes 2 for 4 with a single and a walk and everyone nods and says fine, good enough. In the way where the baseball world reminds itself why he has always been considered one of the most generational hitting talents of his era. In the way where Cleveland's pitching staff goes back to the hotel tonight quietly relieved they do not have to face him again for several months. That is the version of Vladdy that this team needs right now. Not because he is the only player on the roster, but because his energy, his presence, his willingness to impose himself on a game is contagious in a way that elevates everyone around him. When Vladdy is locked in, this lineup becomes a different animal entirely. When he is passive, when he is chasing pitches, when he is going through mechanical motions rather than trusting his instincts, this offense loses something that is very difficult to replace from anywhere else on the roster. The Guardians series is 3 games. 3 chances to flip the script. 3 opportunities to do something that this Blue Jays team has not been consistent enough at doing, winning baseball games when the pressure is real and the circumstances are uncomfortable. A sweep in either direction could be genuinely season-defining, which sounds dramatic for late April, but the record is 10-14. There is no room left in this calendar for another 3-game stretch of going through the motions and hoping the other team makes more mistakes. Liam and the entire Blue Jays Nation community will be watching every pitch of every inning. Every medical update on Nathan Lux is going to be dissected and analyzed. Every at-bat from Guerrero and Kirk is going to be measured against what this team needs them to be. Every decision John Schneider makes in that dugout is going to be questioned, debated, and held up against the standard of what a team in 4th place with a losing record desperately needs from its manager. And if something breaks, if Maciver gets an unexpected promotion, if the Lux hamstring news gets worse, if another piece of this roster goes down, you will hear about it immediately because that is exactly the kind of accountability journalism this fanbase deserves. The Blue Jays are not dead. Let's be absolutely clear about that. April records have been overcome before. Rosters have been repaired. Teams have found their footing after stumbling starts and gone on to do remarkable things. But none of that happens automatically. None of it happens without confronting the truth of what is actually going on, without holding the front office accountable for moves that do not make sense, without demanding more from the stars on this roster, without acknowledging that a 10-14 record in late April is a serious problem that requires a serious response. So here is where we stand. Nathan Lux is day-to-day, with every reason to be skeptical of the optimistic timeline. Willie Maciver is in AAA, a depth move that says more about the organization's anxiety than it does about its confidence. Tyler Fitzgerald is designated for assignment, which is a real cost being paid for a questionable return. The Cleveland Guardians are in town and they are coming with bad intentions. And the Blue Jays have 24 games of evidence suggesting they have not yet figured out who they are or what they are capable of sustaining. But tonight is a new game. And in baseball, this is the beautiful, maddening, completely irrational truth about baseball. Anything can happen in a single game. Momentum can shift on one swing. A pitcher can find something he lost. A lineup can suddenly look unrecognizable from what it was 24 hours earlier. The Blue Jays are still in this. But the clock is ticking louder than it was last week. And the margin for more of the same is basically gone. Now it is your turn. Drop a comment right now and tell me, do you still believe this Blue Jays roster can turn it around before May becomes a complete disaster? Are you frustrated with the Maciver acquisition, or do you think Atkins deserves more time to work through the roster issues? And what does Vladdy Jr. need to do tonight to change the energy of this entire series? The comment section is open and the debate is very much alive. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. We are closing in on 5,000 subscribers and every single one of you matters as we build the most honest, most passionate Blue Jays community on this platform. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a breaking update, because with this roster right now, those updates can come at any hour. Let's go Blue Jays. But please,